Hello everybody, my name is Walter and this is episode 27 of my Redstone Components Series. In this episode I want to cover the 1.21.5 or Spring to Life update. So let's start with the new plants and plant variations. The first of those is the introduction of the Wildflowers. Those are a decorative floor block you can place on dirt-like blocks and grass blocks, and it comes in 4 stages, quarter by quarter basically, and depending on where you stand when you start out, the whole texture gets rotated around a bit. This block can be bone mealed to get more of it or to advance it to the next stage. You can compost it and you can also craft it into yellow dye. Similarly, we have the leaf litter, which also comes in 4 different stages. And to get it, you can simply smelt leaf blocks. This can be also placed on pretty much any other block that has a corresponding texture on the surface. So you can place it on, for example, a stairs block, but basically any kind of flat surface will do besides that. Then we have a living bush, the counterpart to the dead bush from the desert. This block can be bone meal to get more, and if you have shears or silk touch, you can also get the block itself. Then, a bit more interesting, we have the Firefly bush. This emits a light level of 2, and if it's in the darkness, it also emits in a 5-meter radius the corresponding Firefly particles. So let's see, and in a few moments we should start seeing, the Firefly particles being emitted. So it's not too strong, but occasionally you can notice them. If you are looking for them, you can find them in the swamps, in the badlands, and near water, so rivers and so on. And to duplicate them, you can also use bone meal. Obviously, all of those plants here can be also composted. Then we also have dry variants now of the short and the tall grass. Can be found in the desert and the badlands. Again, can be bone mealed. Short grass becomes tall grass, and the tall grass produces short grass in its surrounding. Then, and this is very important to know about if you are building certain types of farms, cactuses, now when they grow, have a certain chance to, instead of growing, produce a cactus flower on top. This will stop the growth of the cactus. So that can break some farm types. So this is something to keep in mind. The cactus flower itself can be crafted into pink dye, so this opens up another opportunity to make a farm, but you have to be careful that it doesn't break a farm you're actually using right now. And then this is a part that has changed in the world generation. We now have fallen trees for oak, spruce, birch, and jungle trees. So you usually find a stump and then the tree trunk lying with a little bit of a gap in between. Now, after talking about the plants, it's time for the mob changes, and the first one I want to cover has to do with the zombie piglin. They will no longer drop their special loot, like XP for example, when they are not directly killed by the player. That means that the old school and somewhat overpowered XP farms will no longer work. A bit sad, but it was a long time coming because they were really overpowered in a sense. Beyond that, there were a few changes to textures and new variants. So the cow and the pig now come in a cold, temperate, and warm variant. The old textures are the temperate one now, and we have different textures for the cold and the warm. You can find them in the corresponding biomes. But aside of looking slightly different, they are exactly the same. We also have a cold, temperate, and warm variant of the chickens now, and they also introduced a cold and a warm egg now. And the temperate is the old one, so that looks just as it did before. Beyond that, we have a few more changes. So we now have different rules when it comes to sheep colors in different biomes. So depending on where you are, you might find certain colors a bit more abundant than others. We also have new variants for the wolves. And as I can already see here, the spawn eggs or the textures for the spawn eggs have been reworked to better represent what kind of mob they are for. Next up, the crafting recipe for the lodestone was adjusted, and now instead of using a netherite ingot, you only need an iron ingot in the center, which makes this much cheaper and much easier to get in decent quantities. Now, beyond the obvious gameplay relevant changes, there were also quite a few adjustments in the background for things like data structures and commands I want to cover at least briefly here. The first one is the introduction of the test blocks and the test command. Both together allow you to create automatic tests you can run on the execution of a single command. to, well, test stuff. So if a new update comes around, you can just run a corresponding test, and then you know that the specific Redstone behavior your contraptions depend on still works or was broken. So that can be quite useful for regression testing when you're a Redstoner. Next up, we have a very, very useful change to the commands fill, clone, setblock, and place template, which is the introduction of the new strict option. When this option is used, then no block updates and no shaped updates will be created by the introduction of the new blocks. This is big. Why? Well, if you use the clone up to this point and your contraption contained lots and lots of observers, there was a good chance that the contraption broke because one or two or many of those observers decided to just trigger during the cloning. And let me tell you, that is an absolute nightmare if you want to test, for example, a big vault door and you need to make sure that the door actually works in the first place and is not broken just because an observer decided to fire in the wrong moment or during the cloning. So I'm very, very happy about this change, actually. Nevertheless, let's show you this in action. So I have an observer here, which when triggered lights up the lamp. And this here is just a normal set block command. So you can see every time I place this, I get a trigger. But this is also a set block command, but this time I'm using the strict option. So you can see with strict, I don't get an update. Without strict, I get an update. So that is exactly what I'm talking about. Very, very useful, and I'm really, really happy about this change. And that brings me to the last and, in my opinion, even worst change with this update, and that is that pretty much every single data pack that is currently out there has been broken with this update. For two reasons. One, JSON text is now SNBT text. Now this is a simplification, and this makes actually sense. Now keywords like, for example, text don't need to be in quotation marks. So it greatly simplifies how you can write this down. Of course, this also means that every command, every data pack needs to be adjusted accordingly. With this change, they also changed click event and hover event and some other stuff to snake case from camel case, which in my opinion really smells like a new programmer or a new developer who didn't look at the rest of the code, because everything else in the NBT data, with the sole exception being namespaces, is camel case, or at least it was. Now we have a wild mix of camel case and snake case, which is suboptimal. Also, when you have a click event, you no longer have a value with the corresponding command. Now you have a command. This, in a sense, somewhat makes sense, but again, this means that you have to adjust all of your data packs and whatever. Also, very important one here. Do not revert to an earlier version of the game if you have already updated to 1.21.5. If you tried it, every single sign, every single book, everything that contains text in some sense is blank. You will lose everything. So do not go back if you have already upgraded. This is very important to realize. And the second change were some adjustments, primarily simplifications to NBT data, which makes sense. But once again, we have some things that were changed from camel case to snake case, and some are left as they are. So we now have, as I said, a wild and unpredictable mix. Now I could go more into the details, but that would take at least half an hour. Instead of that, I'm going to link a video by Conure, who made a very good overview over the changes. So I don't really think it makes sense to double up on that. And with that, we've reached the end of this episode about the 1.21.5 update. I hope you enjoyed it. I wish you a nice day, and well, see you.